Hello folks, this is Jason from Mysterious Wilderness. Today, we're venturing deep into one of the most captivating yet mystifying landscapes in North America, the Great Smoky Mountains. These ancient forests, with their hidden valleys and rugged peaks, are more than just a national park. They're the backdrop to a mystery that has perplexed investigators for decades. Over the years, people have vanished from these woods without warning and without trace. Some were experienced hikers, while others were children under watchful eyes. But all have one thing in common: their disappearances defy logical explanation. Could these vanishings be the result of tragic accidents, or is there something more insidious at work? Something we have yet to understand about the ancient forests of Appalachia. Since the early 20th century, hundreds of people have mysteriously disappeared in national parks and wilderness areas across the United States. And the Great Smoky Mountains, nestled in the heart of Appalachia, is no exception. The Smoky Mountains, with their ancient trees and deep, hidden caves, have long held a reputation for being both beautiful and dangerous. It's a place where nature rules and where people can vanish without a trace. But is there something more to these disappearances than just the perilous wilderness? Many of the victims vanish in areas they shouldn't be able to, close to campsites, on well-traveled trails, or even in the presence of others. Are these simply tragic accidents, or is there something deeper happening in the forest of Appalachia? As we move forward, keep an open mind and consider the possibility that not all mysteries have easy explanations. The first case we're looking at is the disappearance of Polly Melton. On a late September afternoon in 1981, 58-year-old Polly Melton set out for what could be called a routine hike. It was a day like any other, bright and clear, with the early autumn leaves just beginning to turn gold. Polly was no stranger to the Smoky Mountains. She and her husband owned a vacation home nearby, and they spent much of their time in the area. That afternoon, Polly and two of her friends decided to take a familiar trail through the Deep Creek area. It was a path they had walked many times before, winding through the woods and following the gentle curve of the creek. Polly was feeling good that day, walking ahead of her companions, something she often did. But as the group approached a bend in the trail, Polly disappeared from view. Her friends expected her to reappear around the corner, but when they reached the bend, she was gone. At first, her friends weren't worried. Polly had walked ahead, maybe to find a spot to rest or to enjoy the solitude of the forest. But as the minutes ticked by and Polly didn't return, their concern began to grow. They called out to her, their voices echoing through the trees, but received only silence in return. The trail wasn't difficult. Polly had hiked it many times, and she was in good health. There was no reason to believe she had gotten lost or fallen, and there were no sounds to suggest any kind of struggle. She was simply gone. Concern quickly turned to panic, and Polly's friends alerted the park rangers. Within hours, a search was underway. Over the next several days, hundreds of volunteers, park rangers, and law enforcement scoured the area, combing through the dense forest and following the path Polly had walked. Helicopters flew overhead, scanning the terrain from above, while search dogs were brought in to pick up her scent. But no trace of Polly was ever found. No clothing, no tracks, no signs of a fall or injury. The dogs picked up nothing. The local community was left stunned. Polly Melton wasn't just a visitor to the Smoky Mountains. She was a seasoned hiker who knew the trails well. Her friends, who had been only yards behind her when she disappeared, couldn't make sense of how someone could vanish so completely in such a short time. Speculation began to swirl. Some suggested that Polly might have suffered a sudden medical emergency, like a heart attack or stroke, and wandered off in a daze. But if that had happened, why hadn't the search teams found any sign of her body? Others wondered if she might have slipped into a hidden ravine or cave, lost to the wilderness. But again, no evidence supported this. As the weeks passed, the search was eventually called off, and Polly Melton was declared legally missing. For her husband, family, and friends, the loss was devastating, not just because of her sudden disappearance, but because of the complete lack of answers. Polly had been there one moment and gone the next. No closure, no explanation, only silence from the wilderness. But the questions surrounding Polly's disappearance don't stop there. Could something more mysterious have happened that day in the Smoky Mountains? Polly's case shares many of the eerie characteristics associated with the missing 411 phenomena. She disappeared without a sound, without a trace, and in an area she knew well. Search teams, which should have found at least some sign of her, came up empty. Some believe Polly may have encountered something or someone that led to her disappearance. Others suggest a more supernatural explanation. Was she taken by something lurking in the forest? Something beyond our understanding? Or did the wilderness itself claim her, as it has so many others? So next, let's look at the vanishing of Trenny Gibson. October 8th, 1976, was supposed to be just another school field trip. Trenny Gibson, a 16-year-old student at Bairden High School in Knoxville, was excited to spend the day exploring the Great Smoky Mountains with her classmates. It was a cool autumn day, the leaves had just begun to change, and the class was set to hike along the trails around Clingman's Dome, one of the highest peaks of the Smokies. But by the end of the day, the excitement would give way to fear, and a mystery that has baffled investigators for more than 4 decades would begin to unfold. Trenny, like so many others in the Smoky Mountains, would vanish without a trace. The hike started off uneventfully. Trenny walked with her classmates, chatting as they made their way through the scenic trail. At some point during the hike, Trenny became separated from the group. It wasn't unusual for students to spread out a bit, with some walking faster than others. But when her friends noticed she wasn't with them anymore, they began to worry. Trenny had been seen just moments before. One classmate recalled seeing her bend down to examine something along the trail, but when the class regrouped later on, Trenny was nowhere to be found. They called out for her, searched the area, but there was no sign of her. It was as if she vanished into thin air. The moment her teachers realized that Trenny was missing, panic set in. They immediately notified the authorities, and a large-scale search began. Rangers and search and rescue teams, volunteers, and even members of the FBI were called in to help find the missing teenager. For days, they combed through the area around Clingman's Dome, scouring the rugged terrain and dense forest for any clue, any sign of where Trenny might have gone. Helicopters flew overhead, and search dogs were brought in to follow her scent, but like so many others in the missing 411 cases, the dogs quickly lost the trail. It was as if Trenny had disappeared without leaving any trace behind. Despite their best efforts, no clues were found. There were no footprints, no discarded clothing, no broken branches to indicate a struggle. Trenny had been there one moment and simply gone the next. As the days turned into weeks, hope of finding Trenny alive began to fade. The search was eventually called off, and her family was left with no answers. Investigators considered various theories. Some believed she had gotten lost, perhaps wandered off the trail and into the dense wilderness, eventually succumbing to the elements. But that didn't explain the lack of evidence. Others thought she might have fallen victim to foul play. The idea that someone had abducted her from the trail was plausible, but once again, no evidence, no signs of a struggle or any suspicious activity was ever found. To this day, the disappearance of Trenny Gibson remains unsolved. Her family continues to search for answers, but the Smoky Mountains hold their secrets close. What happened to Trenny on that cool October day in 1976? Did she simply wander off into the wilderness, lost to the elements? Or is her disappearance connected to the strange and unexplained forces at work in the Smoky Mountains? And this brings us to our conclusion. The Great Smoky Mountains and their surrounding national forest are places of breathtaking beauty, a sanctuary for nature, home to countless species, and a haven for those seeking peace and solitude. But beneath the serene surface, these ancient woods hide secrets that defy understanding. Over the years, countless individuals, hikers, hunters, and travelers have ventured into these forests, only to disappear without a trace. From the familiar trails of Klingman's Dome to the untamed wilds of the Nantahala and Pishka National Forest, these vanishings share eerie similarities. Experienced outdoorsmen, families, and children, people who should have been found, who should have left behind clues, are swallowed by the wilderness, their fates never fully explained. Some dismiss these disappearances as tragic accidents, the work of harsh weather, difficult terrain, and the unpredictability of nature. But for those who have studied the data closely, the patterns are difficult to ignore. And whether these disappearances are the result of natural causes, human interference, or something far more mysterious, the questions linger. Could there be a common factor, a force, either natural or supernatural, that's responsible for these vanishings? Or are these simply coincidences, a tragic series of accidents born from the unforgiving wilderness? So, what do you think happened to the people who disappeared in the Smoky Mountains? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your theories, ideas, and your questions about these mysterious cases. Together, maybe we can shed some light on the dark secrets hidden in these ancient forests.